What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Been chopping down this grass over here for the last couple of hours, but it's about to get dark, so I guess I'm gonna have to pack it in. But as I was chopping, I started thinking to myself, which is what often happens when you perform a mindless task. Shit, it's mindless until you bury the machete in your shin. That'll give you something to think about. Anyway, I was thinking about the dishonesty of our current system and the ignorance of the people in it, as far as obviously what we eat is concerned. So we have all these modern diseases, and I'm going to make this quick, that did not exist prior to the advent of agriculture. And we know this. This isn't debatable, honestly. We know all this. Or they didn't exist to the same extent, obviously, right? Things such as cancer, heart disease, diabetes, they have just gone through the roof very recently. In the last few decades, right? Especially. And more our society's been eating a plant-based diet. And the dishonesty is that, you know, people who eat 10, 5, 2% of their diet in form of meat, they're called meat eaters. The dishonesty is just crazy. They're not meat eaters. I mean, they are also meat eaters, but they're predominantly plant eaters. Okay? The average American eats somewhere between, I don't know, 10 or 20%. Only 10 to 20% of their diet as animal products. Not just meat, animal products. Somebody who eats 2%, 5%, 7, 9, 10, 15, 20%. All of those people, they're called meat eaters in our society, right? Meat eaters, meat eaters, meat eaters. But you try to call those people carnivores. Oh man, all hell breaks loose, huh? Do you not see the hypocrisy, the blatant contradiction? Another self-refuting ideology? So we have people who eat 5, 7, 9%, 2% of their caloric intake in form of meat. And they're getting all kinds of diseases, right? Heart disease, diabetes, cancer. And somehow we've convinced ourselves, even though there's no science to prove this, but somehow people believe this propaganda that it's the 5 to 20% of your diet that's killing you and not the 80 to 95%. Somebody who has steak once a week and eats maybe eggs for breakfast a couple of times a week, that's a meat eater. But call a meat eater a carnivore, which is the definition of carnivore, and they call you crazy. Nah, I'm perfectly fine. I'm saying my B12 levels are where they're supposed to be. It's all of you who don't understand what's going on, who are unwilling to listen, who are completely illogical. You're the baddie ones. B12. People want to say, vegans often say, well, everybody's deficient in B12, right? When you point out that vegans are almost always, long-term vegans, almost inevitably are deficient in B12 levels, which in my opinion were set by where the levels which, these so-called healthy levels, were determined by measuring the blood serum levels of B12 deficient people who don't eat enough meat to begin with. But that's a whole nother story, right? But, you know, vegans will often defend themselves and their low B12 levels, or the reason why they need to supplement their B12, by saying, well, meat eaters they're also deficient in B12, but not as much. These so-called meat eaters, that it's a sin to call them carnivores, fuck my life. Why do you think they're deficient in B12? Also, not as much as vegans, but also vegans are the most deficient, vegetarians little less, and a lot of meat eaters are also deficient, but not as deficient as those two other groups I just mentioned. Why do you think that is? Because nobody eats enough meat. And meat eaters are carnivores by definition.